she listened very patiently. There were, I think, 14 people in all. And she spent 2 hours listening to the suggestions. And she was making notes while people were speaking. I think it was one of the most incredibly attentive finance minister sessions that I've attended. So I do believe, I agree with what Suhail is saying, that this is going to be a budget with a difference. It's going to be a budget which is path-breaking. Pawan, as always, is always very convincing and very logical and very compelling. And frankly, if I may say so, every time I interact with Pawan or alongside him, I walk away learning something.
But you've done a lot in the pandemic. Sanjeev has just launched Karma with karaoke, which adds to the happiness factor.
Yeah, that's a good one that we've launched, and we are going to launch one more version in the next 6 months, which is going to be like a different generation.
Thanks, Sanjeev, for those very kind words.
Excuse
Let me echo my...
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, sir.
Yeah, Minister will be joining in next 1 minute.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Good evening. The Honorable Minister will be joining us in about a minute. We are also telecasting this live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you for joining us. Just in about a minute, we should start with the formal proceeding with the Honorable Finance Minister, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman.
It's an eerie silence, huh?
Suhail, you're there to break that.
No, nowadays I'm only totoing, not breaking.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
If we have your permission, should we begin, ma'am?
Yes, yes. Yes, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Indian Chamber of Commerce, it is my honor to welcome our chief guest, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, Honorable Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs, Government of India. I would also like to welcome Shri Sanjeev Goenka, Chairman ICC Advisory Council and Chairman RP Sanjeev Goenka. And a very warm welcome to all our delegates who are joining us virtually on various platforms. After sailing through 10 months of challenging times, we can clearly see the light at the end of the tunnel getting closer. India's economy is showing strong signs of recovery. Ma'am, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you and the Government of India. With your continuous guidance and support and the visionary leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, today India is on its path of not just recovery, but also developing new avenues of growth which will propel us to not only one of the strongest economies in the world, but a self-reliant one, an equitable one, where the fruits of progress will be enjoyed by 1.3 billion proud Indians. The dream of Atmanirbhar Bharat that was envisioned by Honorable Prime Minister is now a dream of every citizen of India. The proactiveness and the resilience showcased by the Government of India has been exemplary and recognized by the whole world. With the focus on effective implementation of reforms and the collective determination of the industries, we will surely be fulfilling the vision of a $5 trillion economy in the near future. Ma'am, as the President of Indian Chamber of Commerce, I, on behalf of all my fellow industrialists, commit our support and resolve towards our country's growth. We stand by you and the Honorable Prime Minister's vision for our beloved nation, and collectively, we will make it happen. As Modi ji once quoted, if 124 crore people work together, India will move forward 124.5 crore steps. With these few words, I once again welcome our chief guest, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, and I would request Shri Sanjeev Goenka to deliver the theme address. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Finance Minister. And let me add my own very warm, very special welcome to you this evening. You honor the Indian Chamber of Commerce by your presence. First of all, Madam, let me state, I've said this before, I have no hesitation in saying it again. We see a great deal of thought going into your policy making, into your announcements, into your planning. And for that, we are very, very grateful. We have not seen this kind of planning in the past. There are many bold and phenomenal steps. You are changing the paradigm for the future and preparing India for a new world, for Atmanirbharta. But you know, being human, dil mange more. So there is no end to industry asking for more and more. Please bear with us. I'm going to make 2 points, madam. You took the great initiative of introducing 15% corporate tax for new manufacturing facilities. But COVID has delayed the implementation of many of these projects, and it may not be possible for all such projects which have been initiated in this period to finish before the deadline of March 23. So a humble request, if this deadline could be extended by 6 to 9 months. Second, one of the key inputs of cost for setting up new facilities is land. It's not only a huge cost, it's also an infrastructural issue. The government and the public sector undertakings have a lot of surplus land. If this land could be released to companies, to individuals who are willing or keen to set up manufacturing units, it would go a long way in mitigating the land issue and reducing the cost of land. Frankly, beyond this, there is very little to ask because you have done everything that we hoped for and more. Once again, my huge compliments to you and your team for the splendid work that you have been doing and the inspiration that you provide Indian industry and the Indian economy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam, can I please request you to kindly address our chamber now?
Good evening. Thank you, Indian Chamber of Commerce, for giving me this opportunity once more to be with you all and share my thoughts with you. Mayank Jalan particularly and Sanjeev Goenka, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It's always been very refreshing attending a Chamber of Commerce which is outside of Delhi, if I can use that word. Of course, there are several, but you seem to stand out as the one which is, so from the east and so on. So it's always been very refreshing engaging with you. And all the Chamber of Commerce, industry leadership, I owe a very big word of gratitude, because I think if 2019-20 went by with a certain set of challenges, at that time it was more a question of lack of liquidity, slowing economy, wanting to boost demand, first of all getting liquidity to reach where there was a need for it, and so on. Even as we did go around the country meeting with all the chambers of commerce and getting their inputs and seeing how best we can intervene to help the situation between 19 and 20. Early calendar year 20, we saw some kind of a revival, green shoots, and because of the tax decision that we had taken, which you have referred to, corporate tax related in 2019 September, certainly there was a lot of energy and new interest in the industry, which was getting seen early calendar year 20. But of course, budget got prepared, budget was presented, and even during the budget session, the escalation of worry on the COVID led to a situation where many of the days of the parliament session itself had to be brought to a closure, meaning it was all collapsed to a shorter session, quickly clear the budget and close. And after which was the lockdown, and you know, the world went through a different kind of rigor. So whether it was 1920 and post that, even more importantly, 20 till today, the constant engagement with different chambers of commerce, constant engagement with the chambers and business leaders also to get their ground reports, Prime Minister himself sitting and engaging with business leaders from all over the world. Technology gave us that lead advantage so that each one of us, wherever we were able to engage with one another, and the Prime Minister also took his own feedback from the industry. That constant engagement, whether in 1920 or during 20, has given this government a great deal of strength, through which we were able to come up with interventions, whether it was in 1920 or more importantly during a pandemic which has not been seen in the last 100 years. And I pray to God we should not see it for next several 100 years. It has really sort of caused that kind of a disruption, which any amount of intervention by the government, from the government, will not be adequate at all. And I concede that any amount of intervention, any number of intervention, and any fiscal generosity is just not going to be adequate. But even then, because of the way in which industry kept interacting, giving ideas, pointing at areas of distress, we have definitely done a little bit of exercise and periodically came up with, as you know, the first one was Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, which put lives on the top and gave food grains freely to about 80 crore of our population for 8 full months. Just so that we didn't want our poor to suffer, they should have food to feed their children with and so on. At that time, cooking gas was given for free, and then some cash was also given through direct benefit transfer to their accounts. So if that was Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan, then you know we came up with 3 different Atmanirbhar Bharat announcements, through which the amounts which were brought in by the government was made very, very clear. Together with the RBI, we have brought in that kind of a intervention which was clearly tailor-made so that various sectors can get covered without us naming the sectors. We said emergency credit guarantee, whoever wants it, please come. It was on demand-driven basis. Banks had no business to reject anybody who approached them if they were under distress and they wanted the assistance. Government stood guarantee. Then, of course, we gave the partial guarantee through the subordinate debt. We filled in for the infrastructure investments which had to happen in the agriculture sector. If sector-wise some kind of a thing was happening, we didn't name and restrict it for sectors. We said it's open for everybody. But if this was going towards keeping industries floating so that, you know, some hand-holding is happening, Prime Minister's nature it is not to let go any opportunity to reform and bring in systemic changes, which have been pending for years. And after all, if I were to talk 1 minute of political line, repeatedly we were questioned saying, where is that great moment in terms of reform? Like if you were to compare it with 1991. 1991, yes, was a big step forward, but it had a balance of payment crisis, which Government of India then rightly, and I give due credits to them, understood the need for opening up Indian economy. But subsequently, several such steps, if it had been taken in time, the Indian economy's strength would have been far greater than where we were at the beginning of 2020. So, Prime Minister's nature it has been, even as a Chief Minister of a state, he never let go an opportunity to bring in greater openness, greater transparency, and to make sure systemic reforms are undertaken. Even now, during the pandemic, even as the industry, we're all trying to see what best to do to reset themselves in the changed environment. How is technology going to bring in greater flexibility for you, particularly in the variable costs? He didn't miss out the opportunity to bring in that big reform of reforming the agriculture sector. Similarly, bringing in the labor codes to make sure that industry now, when they're particularly going through the reset mode, should have that flexibility, even as we equally ensure the safety, security, and the social security of our workers. So, reform happened, Atmanirbhar package. 1 minute I would like to spend on what Atmanirbhar is all about. After all, you in the industry know that several of you are producing goods, providing services, world class. But that strength is not being utilized by our own economy. Many of what you produce, many of what you are willing to service are all being imported. So Prime Minister's announcement on Atmanirbhar Bharat was primarily to say India, as it looks forward to getting into the global value chain, should also get into it from the platform of strength. Indian entrepreneurial strength should have to be given greater impetus, and that is where, when we spoke of Atmanirbhar, it is not to close the doors into India or the windows outside of India to reach out to the world outside. It was more to say, build the strength of the Indian entrepreneur, give him all that support he requires, so that those commodities which he is providing by producing them, and the services that he was providing because he specialized in it, cannot be eroded into by imports which can be clearly avoided. And that is where, even when we did not stop the imports, we only made them expensive by putting some duties on them. So nothing is closed for imports. But clearly, we don't want to support imports of those goods which you are producing, those services which you are capable of providing. So that is the spirit with which Atmanirbhar has been brought in. We are conscious that raw material support, intermediary goods support through imports will have to carry on. We will continue with that. Even as we are going towards the making of the next budget, after an extraordinary year where challenges have been very different, one thing I would like to assure the industry is the public expenditure will continue, and with better pace. Public expenditure, meaning capital expenditure from the public sector undertakings, particularly for infrastructure, will be kept up. I would like to underline the fact that government's expenditure and for infrastructure is something which we are, as it is, very much into, and you know we are not just talking off the cuff. In December 2019, like never before, a compendium which is available online too, a compendium of all the infrastructure pipeline projects are put on for anyone to use. The pipeline is announced. More than 6,000 greenfield and brownfield projects are available. And several sovereign funds which are interested in coming into India are also engaging with the National Infrastructure Investment Fund that India has created, the NIIF. Today we are able to see, with all the tax concessions that we've given, that several sovereign funds and pension funds from abroad are keen to come to India. And that kind of an investment readiness explains why there is an FDI flow into India. Inward FDI flow into India is much, much higher in proportion than compared to comparable economies. Emerging economies, the amounts that they are receiving compared to what we are receiving explains why. They're not just money coming in through FII. They are FDI money, which means they're coming for investment with partners like you. And they want to remain invested and be on your boards. They're going to govern also decision making to an extent. So they're committed to be here. They're coming in because our macroeconomic fundamentals are strong, even as there are challenges. But more importantly, that there is an elected, stable government. A government which is looking at progressive reforms. A government which doesn't shy away from taking very strong decisions. And a government which has made very clear that the disinvestment agenda, for which the cabinet has given clearance, will go on. You have already seen that even during the even during the pandemic, our efforts to disinvest some of those big companies are going on fine. The EOIs have come in, the next stage is going on. And even within this financial year, I expect Deepam to be able to prove that they are even more actively engaging in those disinvestments for which cabinet has already given the approval. Banking sector is also going through a lot of changes. Professionalized running of banking sector, making sure that risk officers are being brought in from outside. They're not going to be ingrown officers sitting there not assessing risk in the true sense of the word. Banking is getting professionalized. The way in which banks are engaging, and you see the State Bank of India saying that co-originated loans are something which they will be very happy to engage with. And I'm pushing all the banks also to be ready to handle co-origination, because NBFCs have their advantage in the way in which they spread all over the country in tier 2, tier 3 areas, where some of the banks are not present. So dynamism is what you see now. Post-lockdown, in the way in which government and every department of the government is functioning, there is a greater element of wanting to be nimble. And for government to be nimble is because the Prime Minister himself is saying, get going, reach out to people who want that kind of a support from you. So you're seeing a government which, as per the original understanding of what Prime Minister Modi campaigned during election, is now also getting affected. Just as in the initial days of 14, you saw a lot of energy going in. Of course, in the parliamentary democracy, there can always be ups and downs. Rajya Sabha had its difficulty in one or the other. But by carefully discussing with all stakeholders, we are taking every step forward. So I would invite you to actively engage with the government, to give us your suggestions for what you think this budget should be like. Because this is an extraordinary time through which we are coming out, very clearly because of Indian entrepreneurial energy, spirit, and the instinct to survive and come out of the difficulty. We are seeing clear signs of revival across the board. But for it to sustain, I need to understand from you, the industry leaders, as to what exactly you are looking at. What is the changed economy wanting? What are the kind of things in which government has to be and facilitate, and what are the things in which government should not be. Stay away and watch. So I would like your input. I'll be very happy to receive it well in time so that any inputs which have to go in the budget making can go in. So with those words, I thank very much for this opportunity yet again to address you all. It's always been a learning experience talking with you. Thank you.
Madam Finance Minister, thank you so much for joining us. We are aware that you have an appointment and you're hard pressed for time. But if I was to just take 2 minutes and share an incident while I was the president of this chamber, we have interacted with many ministers in the past in various leadership roles. I distinctly remember our interaction with you a few months back when you came during the pandemic on a virtual with executive committee members of ICC. And your only first line was, I've come here to listen to you. I am not going to talk. I am going to listen to all of you. And you patiently heard us for more than an hour and a half. And you took copious notes. And we saw so many of those convert into real-time action. This partnership between the government and the industry is what is going to lead us to be by far the strongest economy in the world. I can commit as the president of Indian Chamber of Commerce that we will leave no stone unturned. Our pre-budget memorandum is getting made. And as soon as Vikash takes over as the president tomorrow, I'm sure he will engage and he will make sure all the recommendation comes to you. On that note, could I kindly request our senior vice president and soon to be president tomorrow, Mr. Vikash Agarwal, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor and privilege to have our Finance Minister, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, speak to us and share her invaluable time and profound insights with us. Ma'am, we're inspired by the work you are doing for our country with your compassion, selflessness, and optimism, despite huge challenges. Your leadership motivates more than 1 billion people. The early signs of India's economic recovery are indeed very audible. The government policies, initiatives have given our industries the much needed impetus to grow nationally as well as compete globally. At ICC, we look forward to working closely with the government and be an able partner in supporting the cause of industry and business. I would also like to thank Mr. Sanjeev Goenka, Chairman ICC Advisory Council and Chairman RP Sanjeev Goenka Group for being with us today. And thank you to all the members and guests for participating today. Good day. Thank you, ma'am, once again.
And Vikas, my greetings and good luck to you on taking over the leadership of Indian Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, ma'am. Look forward to
sure
your
you
guidance. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's session. Tomorrow, we'll be having our formal AGM. Looking forward to seeing all the members of ICC joining us for the AGM tomorrow.
Thank you.